Episode 49. This week, we are talking about our greatest mentor, Vic Braden. Next couple of weeks, a two-part series, most likely.
Vic Braden. With our podcast, thanks for listening. We're, I think, closer to 100 hours than we are 50 hours.
Yeah.
I put on Facebook today an extract from John Fitzgerald Kennedy's remarks at a dinner awarding Nobel Prize winners of the Western Hemisphere, quoting JFK. I think this is the most extraordinary collection of knowledge that has ever been gathered together at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. Someone once said that Thomas Jefferson was a gentleman of 32 who could calculate an eclipse, survey an estate, tie an artery, plan an edifice, try a cause, break a horse, and dance a minuet. When I think of Vic Braden, I think of that quote from JFK because Vic Braden was Thomas Jefferson. I mean, I can remember walking around the Tyler Junior College campus. We talked about Tennis Tech. Not sure if we did Tennis Tech justice, but we did talk about it for 2 podcasts. Mm-hmm. That, you walk across the college campus with Vic Braden, it's philosophy, psychology, could be AV, the audio video, physics department.
Yep.
You walk right in and take the class over. Yep. But pillar number 8, we have 8 pillars. Our tennis course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, we mentioned over 100 coaches, but we have 8 pillars, and we say Vic for last. We say that Vic is the Christmas tree. Mm-hmm. All the others are ornaments, and great, great, great ornaments. We certainly wouldn't be the same, not to underestimate the other 7 pillars, but it is a beautiful tree. But Vic is the stand, and he's the star.
Yeah.
I have an old resume here.
I've got my Vic Braden, one of my Vic Braden Tennis College from back in the day t-shirts, and I also have my Adidas 3-stripe sort of polyester mix sweatpants on because that was Vic's deal.
Vic, I can remember I was on the Vic Braden tennis staff. At one point we were wearing head clothes, and then we started wearing Wilson clothes. But Vic, he had an Izod shirt. And
the polo shirt.
It
was easy to buy him presents because it was like, hey, man, get your polo shirt.
Vic was born in Monroe, Michigan, August 2nd, 1929. Yeah. He died October 6th, 2014, 85 years old, 85 years young. Yeah. Family of 7, but actually family of 8, one of his sisters. She died basically after giving birth to her son, and then Vic's parents raised her son.
Yeah, held the baby for 1 day.
Wow, tragic. Melody, his wife, and then they have, Vic has 5 children. With a few things about a sports background, he was a high school starting quarterback, junior, senior year, starting guard in basketball. In tennis, he played high school, college, and pro tennis. He said that he was...
played baseball, too, in high school.
Yeah, it says here in his resume, Legion League, a catcher and a pitcher. Yeah. But, played against people. I remember he used to tell a story about playing Frankie Parker, a great player from Chicago. This guy does not miss. But, he thought he was a little bit cannon fodder. He was just in that day going first, second round in the tournament with the big boys. Yeah. Table tennis player with... Vic to me, licensed psychologist, self-made biomechanist, author, TV commentator, 3-sport athlete, professional, or perhaps a world-class comedian. Yeah,
for sure. I think that's where people know him from his humor. He was such a great entertainer, really, as he educated people. But a lot of times, and you say this a lot, that sometimes people are just laughing so hard that the information goes right over their head.
Yeah, no, I think Vic was definitely misinterpreted. I don't know anyone who assembled more tennis information. Yeah. Jumping ahead on that, 1975, one take only. Mixed doubles is a fantastic adventure. Go for a winner, name of the film.
So good.
And it really stands the test of time, and it's for all doubles. It's not just for mixed doubles by any means.
Yeah.
So I was living in Boca Raton, Florida. I was a perennial tennis bum. And I was asked if I would, on a Saturday and Sunday, play a film, and it was Go for a Winner. Yeah. And so the challenge was for me was loading and reloading the film on the projector. but I just sat right there. That was my duty as a volunteer.
No, it stands the test of time. That video,
No, for sure.
I've played it many times, and
But I think that was a really, really interesting experience for me, because by watching that over and over again, just knew how knowledgeable he was. It was not just the jokes.
Yeah.
It was like,
dun dun dun, dun dun dun.
well, just for example, why would you put the more consistent player in the deuce court, two right-handed players?
Yeah.
The inside out backhand return, how it's really the left field. It's like the kid who can't play baseball, you put in right field.
Yeah.
So how more balls go to the deuce court? 85% of players are right-handed, and they're running around the forehand. They're pulling across their body, and the ball goes to the deuce court.
Yeah.
85% of players, besides being right-handed, 85% of players are taught a really extreme grip, a strong continental grip, even elbow in. Where's the racket face? It faces the deuce court. And it's a deuce court player. Vic used to always say that, all the lines. A deuce court player is a player who makes the ad court player famous. And, the people who really climb up the ladder generally have always played the ad court, because when they were kids, they were always the best player. And the myth is the best player always plays the ad court, because that's a game-ending point. But Vic's like, hey, how do you get to being up in the ad court? You got to win that deuce court point.
Did you play the deuce court a lot then, or?
Well, I played.
Come on, Steve. That was a joke, man.
Did I play deuce court a lot? I played with a lefty. I played like Arthur Ashe's brother, Jack Ashe.
Oh, yeah. Good old Jack Ashe.
With Vic. He graduated from Monroe High School in 1947. Yep. I went to Kalamazoo College, 47 to 51. Yeah. Did graduate studies at the University of Toledo. Got a master's at UCLA. And Vic is ABD, all but dissertation. He completed all his work. But when he told the academicians, the authorities, that he wanted to prove that you could help a kid more on the playground, more on the athletic field, he was turned down. So he really never looked back on academia. 57
years later, he got his honorary doctorate from K College.
In Toledo was right next to Monroe. It was fun to talk to Scott Perelman, who was also from Monroe, Michigan. Mm-hmm. But Vic, actually, when we were talking to Liam Draxel, his father, Brian, Liam had a great run at the NCAAs. I was just so impressed that his father remembered this photo, but then I found out that Liam's dad played at the University of Toledo. Mm-hmm. But Vic has a picture of the basketball players. He got all the basketball players play tennis, but they're up on a ladder, and they take a string from the baseline. You got to be 14-6 to hit down on a serve. So he was the assistant basketball coach, taught PE classes, and he was the head tennis coach. What he took the basketball players, and you imagine Vic Braden doing this, put the racket in the pizza's position, toss, tap, and run to the net.
Yeah, got him to go forward.
Why don't you talk a little bit about next thing Vic did is he was a sixth grade teacher.
Yeah, Topanga Elementary School in Southern California. Got that here in some of my notes that I wrote down. But sixth grade for 3 years, I believe it was. And what was really cool was, I think it was 2010, is he had a reunion where it was about 100 students came back. I think, maybe 13 or so had already passed away, but they had a reunion and I was able to be there. It was just really, really cool to see the stories, but just, the lives that Vic had affected, as the people told their stories and got together. It was really great. And then I know it was a really special night for Vic, and it was really cool for me to be there and experience that as well. So. No, the magic, the number one Pied Piper, how those people just had such affection for him so many years later. I think one story I think I was talking about this earlier, was when he was an elementary school teacher and teaching sociology, geography a little bit, is they were reading about Haiti. And in the book, they were saying, how Haiti, everything was great, and, life was grand. And he was talking to his friend that was in Haiti, and he said, is this true? And he said, no, it's the opposite of that. I couldn't believe that. And so what he did is he had the sixth grade kids ask questions on an audio tape, and then they sent that audio tape to Haiti to the kids. So his friend in Haiti had the kids then answer the questions to the tape. And then they were able to hear it firsthand from the kids that, yeah, it's actually the opposite. And so that kind of got him going into more of that kind of research and all that kind of stuff. But it was a really important project that I remember him talking about a lot, was that experience.
I know when I could not be at the memorial, the tribute they had for Vic. I know you were there.
That was it.
And one of his students spoke. You actually can listen to that on YouTube. And one of the students, this story was shared, could only see out of one eye. And he's trying to play center field on the baseball team, and Vic has got the fungo bat, and he's hitting balls up, and people were the teammates were making fun of him. So Vic got a patch and made every kid go out in the field, try to catch a ball with the patch over your eye.
It's classic. It's like, see?
When I think of Vic as a sixth grade teacher, what he did when he taught the tennis unit, he filmed and recorded this, and then 25 years later had a reunion. And that's where the phrase traces of the old.
Yeah.
So then he interviews everyone and said, no, I haven't played tennis since the sixth grade. I haven't played since we went through that course.
Yeah.
That 6-week PE class segment. And that's how powerful the brain is.
Yeah.
I mean, once you're programmed to deprogram, I think of a Jim Lair line I use often, it takes a stick of dynamite.
Yeah. I used to always talk about people go off to war or wherever it was, and they'd come back and it was still there.
It's like the cartoon Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunners. Just think of having a kid who's got to change the grip on his forehand from Bud Collins. It's not Western. It's so far over as Hawaiian that have
that's like,
stick of dynamite.
Richard Schmidt, UCLA, was one of the motor learning specialists, where he would talk about, you've got to enter that zone where you get a little bit uncomfortable, and once you can be comfortable being uncomfortable, which Vic used to always say, then you're going to be able to make some changes.
The tape that Vic made with him on motor programming is one of my favorite.
Yeah, it's great.
He was a district psychologist in Southern California, Hermosa Beach. And then after that, for 8 years, he always tells people my job was to walk around and apologize to anyone Pancho Gonzalez insulted.
Yeah.
What a different set of personalities, Pancho Gonzalez and Vic Braden. But he managed the tour.
Yeah, Jack Kramer.
And then also that he had a stint at the Jack Kramer Club, where everything he touched turned to gold. That's an amazing story where Gene Austin, the late Gene Austin, Tracy's mother, family of 5. All 5 were great tennis players. 4 of the 5 children played on the tour.
Yeah.
And Vic gave private lessons, and the kids they had a players' lounge. And at one time, was running a program, extended long weekend in California, and Elliot Telscher, who was a young player at the Jack Kramer Tennis Club, and he was there first with Vic and then with Robert Lansdorp. Robert Lansdorp came in, and I think it was a perfect situation where Vic is a technician, got all these young kids hitting the ball really well, and then Robert, as a taskmaster, came in, and they really made for some special stories. Yeah. But all the sets were being played. Really incredible how many great players came out of that Jack Kramer Tennis Club. Yeah. And then following that, first the Vic Braden Tennis College, Vic really wanted to raise money. So in so many ways, I really think that Vic, it would have been ideal that if he stayed with competitive junior players, but he wanted to raise more money. So that's where he crossed over and got into adult instruction. There was no homeschooling. There's no juniors going to camps. So the Vic Braden Tennis School was primarily for adult players, but it was in San Diego first, and then in Trabuco Canyon. Yeah, and research, really.
I know he was interested in filming and doing all that research that he ended up doing. And I know originally, too, he tried to get some land by the Jack Kramer Club, and there was some land available. And I think to this day it's still available, but they refused to sell. But there was one point where they came pretty close to being able to do that.
I didn't know that. Vic used to say $700 a shot, but he was
Yeah.
That was coming out of his pocketbook.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I thought it was like $1,000 a shot to film Jimmy Connor's 10,000 frames a second or whatever it was, or 1,000 frames a second. Now I can do that on my phone.
Vic Braden Tennis College, I believe it was 16. And they were like townhouses, but they didn't have kitchens.
Yeah.
So they were really just hotel rooms. And so Vic used to say about business, about real estate, I thought you were supposed to buy high and sell low.
Yeah, exactly.
Where one of our students, Mark Walpole, and his partner, they actually bought the tennis college.
Yeah.
But with Vic, I can remember our checks at one point had Mickey Mouse on it because the corporate shuffle, it was owned by Arvida and Disney owned Arvida. But the Vic Braden Tennis College by Time Magazine was called the best tennis facility in creation.
Yeah.
So there was a Vic Braden Tower, and it was built so, Vic could oversee all the courts, and he'd be able to go up and just yell.
Yeah.
Vic used to say when he was at the Kramer Club that he'd have to go eat lunch where he couldn't see any of the students because he'd just go right up. So somebody would be playing, that was his personality. Somebody would be playing doubles, and he'd go, "Hey, Bertha,
What are you doing?"
Toss Laura, Bertha.
Yeah.
I remember being a hitting partner for Vic in some training sessions many times, and he's an empathetic educator. He would be helping me out.
Yeah.
Steve, my sir, you're rubbing your chest against the cement.
I think people could look up pictures of the old tennis college and see it. I mean, the tower was really cool. 4 video rooms below that. The courts, 17 hitting lanes that he designed.
Mark Hamlin, who I grew up with, and has been coaching tennis forever.
Yeah.
And he joined me.
The bone.
Mary Lay, who ran the tennis college, the head coach, she called me in the office and said, "Do you have anybody who wants to do what you're doing?" And next thing you know, Mark Hamlin was in California. And Mark used to say it looks like a grapefruit. You look up look up above. They were all 17 geometrically designed tennis courts.
Yep.
Balls, you could hit 900 balls in 45 minutes.
Yeah, and something like that, 900 an hour.
Vic had it broke down where you accountants, you broke it down to 16 cents a shot.
Exactly.
But the people would be filmed. It was amazing. Under the tower, there was 4 little classrooms.
Yeah.
And there was 6 chairs, and you felt like you were a stewardess talking to people that were riding in an airplane.
Yeah.
And you saw from the library, we have those old posters where Vic's demonstrating each of the basic shots.
Yeah.
But you would go in and Vic took these old baseball pitching machines, and they were the ball machines. And I mean, you could doctor those things where they could just serve world class.
Yeah.
But you'd go in and you would just flip a switch. And I think if you just taught only at the Vic Braden Tennis College, you'd be very spoiled. So
for sure.
So you just flip a switch, and people didn't even know they were being filmed.
Yeah.
And another thing that I know that we've moved away from, which we really shouldn't, is that when someone's being filmed, you as the coach stand right behind them. So the ball comes out of the ball machine, and they're turning with the racket low and 4 feet behind their back, and then the Vic Braden coach is turning with the racket up high.
Mm-hmm.
Then you take them into the classroom. You critique their strokes.
Yeah. And
then from there, I know I got to the point where I was filming them twice in a 45-minute session. But then the ideal rotation was to take them to the ball machine, the lanes.
Yeah.
At one point, they had the TVs on the lanes, but it's so difficult to use to look at the screen when you're out in the sun.
Yeah.
So then they're really isolated from the tennis court. But it was all color-coded where if you hit up in the red, if that's the trajectory for ground strokes, and yellow, and it was adaptable for putting it from one pole to the next. You put a mini tennis net across.
Net was cool.
And then it was an approach shot. Then they would go to the running court. But before they would even start in the lanes, there was the main classroom.
Lecture.
And so that was, I think I told a story about how I had to one time speak where people were waiting for Jimmy Connors, and I had to step in. But there's a few times, I can remember one time I was doing a traveling clinic with Vic, and he got caught in a snowstorm. He's in Denver, and we're doing this clinic in Orlando, and this woman was a little bit upset that Vic wasn't there, and she said, At that time, I just remember it was 29. It was many years ago. She said, well, how long have you known Vic Braden? I thought about it. I said, 29 years. And she was like, oh, okay.
Oh, okay, fine.
But he came in towards the end of the day. TV shows. He was on so many TV shows. I've looked on YouTube.
Yeah, try to find the Hollywood Squares.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
I remember watching him. We're all watching Vic. Vic's on Hollywood Squares. Let's watch Hollywood
That
Squares.
was a cool show.
Yeah.
Should bring that back. Maybe it is back, but
I think it's 9 celebrities and they're asked questions and the 2 people playing, there's the host and the 2 people have to, it's just basically true or false.
Yeah.
Some crazy statement.
yeah.
And,
How high is whatever amount?
yeah. I mean, I've read years later, Paul Lynde, who was a great, comic but they actually were told the questions beforehand.
Yeah. So they could come up with something.
Yeah, but
Either funny or true.
nevertheless, it was good. But
Yeah.
I remember Tracy Austin was so good, and Vic. I remember Vic just saying, "I choked." They brought a ball machine out, and he said the ball came out like 100 miles an hour, and I mean I saw it too, but obviously I wasn't there. But it just skids across the linoleum, and Vic goes, I actually said, take your racket back, which he would never, ever say.
Yeah.
But no, he was just great, very shy, but very unbelievable behind the camera. I was doing a VIP lesson, and it was David Hartman. He was on Good Morning America. I remember my mother used to watch that show all the time. And I told Vic, I said, it's the wife who plays tennis and the 2 little kids. And I said, the dad, former baseball player, he loves golf.
Yeah.
And so the next thing you know, Vic's partner, the Dakota Research Center, you could talk about that. But
Gideon?
With Gideon Arrow, next thing I know is, I'm the gopher and getting the pencil and paper and electrical tape or whatever. And so David Hartman is hitting golf balls. So they do a biomechanical screen sketch with Hartman and then with Jack Nicklaus. And at that time, Gerald Ford was president. And, it's like, 4 or 5 days later, it's on Good Morning America. And
Made it happen.
with, the TV shows, I think we can get into that. But why don't you go through your list a little bit? Some points you
Oh, yes. Just wrote down a few things. I mean, I know you're a notorious note taker in a lot of these podcasts, but a few things I got here. His point really in the end to maximize people's potential, but just the fact about tennis, changes lives, that it's just more than just a sport. So I wrote that down. Tennis changes lives. And I think that's true. I mean, our connection with Vic, it's really a family, family tree, a coaching tree. I think about when my parents used to say heavenly choreography, the way things just kind of come together, the universe aligns, whatever it may be. But I was 13. We kind of moved back to Southern California from Southern Utah and just looking for places to train. And we didn't have a lot of money in my family. And so I think my mom just kind of called up Kodo and she got a hold of Steve Campbell. And Steve Campbell was a tennis techer.
Yeah.
And, so it's just kind of all these things connected. But so went out there and Steve, basically Steve, Vic, they gave me a little work scholarship where I could take group lessons twice a week and then play tennis there freely. But I would do, data entry. I remember helping Vic, kind of organize his film room. I remember seeing old film like Tracy Austin first lesson, stuff like that. Learned to string rackets and just did yard work and then could play there. So I was there for a couple of years when I was really young, which was cool. So just to see how things are connected, between tennis tech and Vic is cool. But tennis changes lives. We talked about Lawrence Alto, Vic stealing tennis balls, and he gave him the choice. You can either go to jail or learn to play tennis. I think we talked about that a little bit with Scotty Perelman. Vic hitchhiking. I've got that down that he hitchhiked around the country when he was like 13 to play tournaments. I don't think that's going to happen these days. Not very often.
Yeah, Vic with the Bees. Todd Bartson at TCU and Glenn Bass at UCLA.
Yeah.
They're all the same age, and they would be assigned to the same family.
Yeah.
Back in those days, you didn't stay in a hotel. Families would house the players.
Yeah, I've got that written down here. How he'd never been to a big home, a restaurant, or a hotel, and he reached the semis when he went to Milwaukee, and he stayed in a hotel for the first time, and he was stealing food, but he didn't know that it was included. So just kind of those things, it's like a little different experience than today's kids.
No, Vic didn't grow up wealthy.
I got here to walked a mile to go to school in a one-room schoolhouse in the first grade. Dad worked at a paper mill. Yeah, we talked about that he was a multi-sport athlete in high school. Didn't have the state championships freshman year because of World War II. So who knows? Could have been a four-time.
Yeah, he won it three. He won it 3 times. It's not easy to win a state championship really in anything.
No. Got here written down too that he had thoughts of a job working on the railroad. Back in those days, it's like, that's where, again, tennis opens so many doors, the chance to travel, see the world. He shined shoes at Fred's shoe repair shop on Saturdays. Got that written down. And he was a scorekeeper for rec basketball as well.
With part-time jazz, Vic used to have the line, I got to save my money to get weighed. It used to be these big scales at a grocery store. You could put a penny in and you could weigh yourself. Yeah. So they could, I got to save up to be weighed.
That's cool. We talked about this a little bit too, living in a ball closet at Kalamazoo. I remember last time I was at Kalamazoo, this is years ago now, but I got a picture of that. Vic Braden lived here, and I think they removed it now, unfortunately.
Yeah, there was a plaque at one time.
Yeah. He said it was big enough for a cot and it was free.
This must have been a little bit cold in Michigan in that ballroom.
Oh, man. No question.
Hardy Northerner.
If people know who Christy Brinkley was, I don't know if we brought this up or not, but he dated Marge Bowling, Christy Brinkley's father. She ended up marrying Don Brinkley. So it would have been a little different, maybe, Christy Brinkley.
Vic was so funny. And so, genetics comes up when you talk about sports. And Christy Brinkley's, I'm 66. Christy Brinkley's 66. She looks a little younger than me. She still looks like she's 26.
Yeah.
But Vic used to say, well, I used to date Christy Brinkley's mom.
Yeah.
And I think, if we became husband and wife and I was the father,
yeah,
I don't think she'd be a world-class model.
Yeah. Maybe just a little shorter. But some of the things I have here, K College, he swept sidewalks. He dropped out after his sophomore year just for a little bit and went to work at Monroe Auto Equipment Company and also a Lazy Boy Chair Company. And he would tack the chairs, with the little tacks. They would spit tacks, they called it. One thing, too, the rheumatic fever left him with some heart defect. And he was not able to join the military because of that. He was trying to sign up with the Air Force Academy. I just got, the things you talked about, graduated in 51, got his master's in LA 10 years later, and then 57 years later after that, got the honorary doctorate, which is cool, from Kalamazoo College. It's a little bit of a timeline. Went to Toledo Tennis Club. Then you mentioned this, the University of Toledo men's and women's team, assistant basketball coach. Learned a lot from the coach there, Jerry Bush. And then off to Palm Springs, teaching El Mirador and Ray Ryan. And then, Topanga Middle School or elementary school. Master's in educational psychology. Mentioned the 6th grade reunion. That was really cool. Kramer Tour, 60-61. One thing I thought was fun was we talked about, with the Kramer Tour, they would travel around a lot of the ice rinks, or a lot of the rinks they had to convert to tennis courts were ice rinks, hockey rinks they played there. And he would say that, if somebody had a really wicked slice serve, he could take him off, that they would be slipping on the ice into the stands. So that's pretty funny. And then, the Rancho Bernardo, Vic Braden Tennis College. Actually, while the new center was being built, they had one in the summer in Lake Tahoe, and then also at Shadow Mountain in Palm Desert in the winter. And then Coto de Casa, 74. the classroom. So we got that, 17 lanes, the tower, the video rooms, and then the strategy courts, which, you know, we were talking about getting some of those or doing that again. Those were really cool, just showing.
You mean painting the lines on the court?
Painting the lines, showing the 10.5 foot mark, the passing lanes, the depth marks. Those were, you know, that was just like, whoa, this is crazy, you know.
I know Richard Hernandez, who we interviewed, Tennis Canada, he went to Tennis Tech, and obviously through us, through that training, knows the Vic Braden method, backwards and forwards. Yeah. But one time he had a court that was painted red, yellow, green.
Oh,
so the zones.
The zones, the court.
Yeah.
I mean, we had the St. George, the Vic Braden Tennis College there. Dave Nostrand was there for over 25 years. They had the courts there as well, plus the lanes. All that was there. I think listeners, you could look up John Zimmerman, who's the Sports Illustrated famous photographer, and there's a lot of videos of John and Vic that he was there often, and they did a lot of cool pictures with John Zimmerman.
Yeah, for example, how the toss arcs forward, and you can just see the tennis ball. You know, high speed photography. Just to see how the toss doesn't, you know, it arcs out to the right.
Yeah.
You know, if you're the righty going to 1 o'clock, where so many people are bringing the toss over their head.
Yeah, even just the motion, the kind of stroke motion that they do now with dartfish, but did the same thing where you see the racket in every position and see the shape of the swing. A lot of creative photography too, and it was actually neat. One of the last, it might have been the last for one of the last Vic Braden tennis colleges that we ran in Kodo. Linda, his daughter, was there, went through the tennis college, which was cool.
Oh, Vic's wife Melody's a professional photographer. It just seems that the Vic Braden Tennis College you'd look left and you look right and there was a camera.
Yeah, exactly. And Vic, we know, filmed everything. I just have written down, you know, trip to China to help relations, and then Chinese officials made Tennis for the Future the national training book. And then years later, they talked about in 2006, a couple American coaches said that the book should be burned. And whether that happened or not, I don't know if that's just a wives' tale, but.
No, I mean, with when Vic first came out with his book in 77, Tennis for the Future, certainly it was revolutionary. Now, you just think, people think it's old school, it's not relevant.
Yeah.
You know, I just ask people, do you believe in gravity?
Exactly. The court hasn't changed. Reminds me of that Hoosiers, you know, where they go, okay, you know, Gene Hackman's like, all right, Ollie, you know, he gets on the guy's back and measure the distance from the hoop. Okay, you know, 10 feet, 15 feet.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's the same. But yeah, Germany, I mean, you could talk about that, the Vic Braden Tennis College in Germany. You were there.
Yeah. Let me just do this first, is that for our listeners, we've covered so much Vic Braden information, forehand, backhand, overhead. We have talked about how we need to go through specialty shots and emergency shots. Mm-hmm. Let me just say this one thing to backtrack a little bit with basketball. Basketball was Vic's favorite sport. And again, when he left the Kramer Club, and certainly it was an outstanding place for adult tennis players to go. What an experience they had at the Vic Braden Tennis College. But Vic was trying to raise money, and then he was with Wilson, and I can remember doing a VIP lesson, several of them with Artis Gilmore. I think he was 7'4". And I remember teaching him to serve, and I remember telling him, "You're too short to hit down." And Artis Gilmore stopped and he said, "No one in my whole life has ever told me I'm too short." So Vic, that's where we talk about the Vic Braden Library. There's so many things.
And that's really just, you know, hitting down on the serve, because some people have come up with, oh, you can be 6'7" or whatever, but it's really to recruit the muscles to hit down. You've got to be taller.
So Vic, you know, he was a jock, and, you know, he was certainly so smart, but he could have the basketball go between, you know, around the back and under the leg, and, you know, spinning on his finger and with this and that. So he, you know, and he's stuffing. You know, you just see the film, and Gilmore is stuffing a basketball, and Braden's stuffing a basketball, and then the camera fades away, and Vic was on a trampoline.
Yeah, it's awesome.
There are so many things that should be pulled out of the Vic Braden Library. Right now, the Tennis Channel, they purchased it. We could go through that a little bit, but Before Germany, let me just go. I'm a product of the tennis boom. Tennis boom, James Van Allen, 1970. Tennis, before that, tennis couldn't be on TV.
Yeah,
and then the tiebreaker changed, but there was certainly, initially, there was sudden death. And then, and Bud Collins, the late commentator, was great friends with Vic. It went from sudden death to lingering death, because sudden death, you just had to win by 1 point. It wasn't fair. It was, the tiebreakers would end 5-4, 5-3, 5-2, 5-1, 5-0. But at 4-all, someone got that extra serve.
Yeah.
So there's for the longest time, there's just 3 TV stations, but then PBS was the 4th. And there was no commercials. And Vic, the changeovers, he would do 1 minute tennis tips.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. Every Monday night was the finals, all summer long.
Yeah.
So that's where, Vic really, through that platform, through television, he entered everybody's living room.
Came into the, it would be great to compare those to some of the 1 minute tips that you see and hear today.
Yeah, that's where we could go back and we could say Thomas Jefferson was a smart guy.
Yeah.
We need to go back to so many things. And again, all these podcasts should support one another. Dave Anderson's Tennis, the film, and Tennis Needs to Go Back to the Future.
Yeah.
I mentioned the progression for me. So, 73, 74, watching Vic on TV. Then I saw the film, 1975. And granted, he was all over Tennis Magazine and articles here and articles there. But so the film I showed in the Boca Raton Mall. Then in 77, his book came out, Tennis for the Future. And you and I will tell people, which is, I think, true, that, there's one thing to read the book, but another thing to actually live the book.
Yeah.
But then I mentioned, we talked about tennis tech, is Jim Mantle. Very, very well read, and not your typical jock just banging tennis balls around, deep thinker. And he was the first person I knew who went to the United States Tennis Academy. Vic's, there was a tennis college, but twice a year he had the USTA.
Yeah.
And he gave that name free of charge when asked to the USTA, because the USTA used to be the USLTA, United States Tennis and Lawn Association, or USLTA, I'm sorry. So,
Melody's still waiting for that check.
Yeah.
USTA.
USTA. In 1978, Gideon Ariel was, and Vic, they were in New York, the Roosevelt, and they were speaking 2 different times. So I made it to that. That's where I met Tom Fye, and Tom Fye's in the audience. And through having read the book backwards and forwards, Jim Mantle coming back, and we're practicing, and he said, change your toss, change what it does, change that. And I remember my background through sports. I have 3 older brothers that never worked with figure skaters. I worked with figure skaters. Older brothers, I don't think that they saw videotape when I was a kid. But I was smart enough when I was sent off to hockey school to take, jump in every extra class you could. Those are the best teachers in hockey I ever had were figure skaters. So, so when someone told you to change something, you just like, okay, I did it. Even if you have a match, go cold turkey. I'm just lowering the toss.
Yeah.
But anyway, Nick Bollettieri, so we should really just have a podcast on Nick. I have a lot of respect for Nick. Nick got into Hall of Fame based on the environment, the culture that he built. I think Braden and Vandermeer, they got in more on education.
Yeah.
But so anyway, Tommy Fye's just raising his hand. He's raised his hand on all these questions. This has been mentioned already. And then Nick Bollettieri said, I don't care. I flunked high school geometry 3 times. God gave me eyes to see tennis. Yeah. So I was sitting with Danny Cooper. At one time, I was running a Vic Braden Tennis College. He's a lawyer in Montreal now, but I just told Cooper, I said, Fye, that guy over there works for Braden. And then I went over and introduced myself, and that's how I found out how you could be on the Vic Braden staff. So I went to the USTA, the Vic Braden Tennis Academy, twice in 79. And then I went out there to live, and I went out there and worked as a volunteer.
I was going to ask you, what I never experienced the USTA. I've definitely seen, you know, tests and things like that. But what was that week like? It was 7 days, right? Or was it 10 days?
No, Dennis Van Meer's Tennis University was 10 days. And remember, they kept the price the same, but the time span was shorter.
Take us through that week a little bit, or the listeners through that week.
Well, Vic certainly would always have guest speakers. He was just a lifelong learner, and he was always complimenting people and saying, "I'm happy to have you as my mentor." But he would lecture in the morning, and then we would go out and they would show the coaching staff would be with the players that we'd shown drills, and you get to go through Q&A with the coaches, and then back to the classroom again. So it'd be morning session with Vic, and then an evening session with Vic, but in between the coaching staff. Then at the end of it, it was a test. It was, I think, pretty sure 200 written questions.
Yeah.
And then there was a film loop.
But the on-court part was more application, like going through drills or...
Well, it was held at the Vic Braden Tennis College. So, it was the early 80s and the place was packed. I mean, if there was one, there was 80 people. I went through it 10 different times. I can remember, I'll get back to your question on court, but I can remember, I think it was Richie Perelman. I'm 99% sure Rich was his first name, and he's from Rochester. People in Rochester loved him. He died of cancer at a very young age. But I can remember being in the pub restaurant at Kodo, and it was just so much information. With Vic, one time I remember there was someone who came in, and when you got there, you had a copy of his book. Mm-hmm. First it was Tennis for the Future. They just hand you a copy. Then at one time it was the children's book, and a person was upset, and that he goes, "Well, we should have been sent this book beforehand." Uh-huh. And Vic said, "Well, I'm not a toad, but the book's been on the market, or the book's been available for 11 years or whatever."
Yeah.
And so there was just so much so soon. After being there for years, I used to think that people should listen to Mary Lay first, because Mary Lay would just, no storytelling, no going off on a tangent, and not talking about the latest research, but just give out the facts. This is the ready position. But no, the application was, okay, so we'll film some players, we'll show how the station works, and then you go to show them how the lanes would work, and people, you'd get hands-on, so you'd be coached by the coaches. So there was application. Over a 10-year period, it didn't really alter, although, and I couldn't tell you for what reason. I know Vic was in demand doing this and doing that, and he also did a lot of TV. He was doing telecasts for
commentating pro
tennis. I would guess that was the reason, but they usually run it in April and then in December. But we have it on. I think maybe we have four of the academies on audio tape. Yeah. And then when I was training tennis teachers, they could go listen to the audio tapes. And sometimes an audio tape can be better than a videotape, just to sit and listen to it. Here's something. Where did the name Uncle Vic come from? Mm-hmm. So by 81, I've been out in California and I'm on the staff. And at one point, I was on the staff as a volunteer, but then I was fine. I was asked to be on the staff as a paid staff member, and I said no thanks, declined. And then it got to the point where I couldn't decline. They said, "You have to."
This is when you were living in your van, right?
Yeah. So so I go at 81. I go to my grandfather's funeral, so I have to go back to the East Coast, Utica, New York, and my grandfather's house. Grandmother sitting around watching TV, and Tennis for the Future comes on. Mm-hmm. And so Vic Braden's on TV, and I'm just sitting there. I'm not saying anything. So one of my brothers, it's actually my brother Mike, he calls my mother into the room, and she played high school tennis. Didn't really start playing till years and years later, but she played. I have a copy of her high school letter. So she comes in the room to watch, and again, Vic is just Henny Youngman. He was just one line after the other, just so funny. Mm-hmm. And I said nothing, and certainly, from there, I was asked, it's kind of let you know that maybe your siblings weren't so interested in what you were doing. Is that I said, you know him? I go, well, I'm on his staff. I work for him. But back in those days, there's no instant communication at your fingertips. So the family sat around and watched it. And so I was asked about Vic Braden. And at that time, my Aunt Anna had passed away. And I said, Vic Braden is just like Aunt Anna. And my aunt was all laughs, total Pied Piper. Everyone loved her. So from that, he was Uncle Vic. Yeah. I mean, he used to call himself Fat Albert. He was calling himself Fat Albert before Bill Cosby started calling himself Fat Albert. From our podcast on Tennis Tech, I remember Scott Schultz, who was in charge at USTAU. He started Ferris State. I'm in a meeting. Come up and have lunch with him at the USTA, and that's when they had more bulldozers on site than tennis balls, and said they were thinking about having a committee and possibly have a committee and possibly have you be on the committee. And he mentioned, like Nick Saviano and Rick Macy, some people that are recognized in the tennis teaching circles. And I told him, I said, we already have a curriculum. I said, there's this gentleman by the name of Vic Braden. And of course, Scott Schultz is from Michigan. But Scott Schultz, I know that he asked. I don't know Greg Jones very well. I don't really know him at all, but I've listened to him speak. He talked to me one time in New York, and he told me that Scott Schultz had mentioned the GreatBase curriculum within the USTA meetings, and the word system just scares people away. Right. System is just an organized plan. But no, I would not want to be in a meeting where they say, okay, let's have a curriculum, and not bring up these tennis teachers from the past that formulate the GreatBase. But coming back to Tennis Europe, I had plans to go to Europe, but it worked out. So I had this clause in my contract where I went to this 2-year school in Texas. But then I didn't really have the same experience as my students, because my students would go to Switzerland. We didn't really have anyone go to Japan, although I spent time with a gentleman who ran, at one time Vic had a school in Japan, but I didn't have the opportunity to stay there and learn the language and truly experience that challenge. But I spent...
How long were you there in Germany? Or would you go back and forth?
Well, I had a school year schedule, so basically I would go over, 4 to 6 weeks, and
in the summer,
and I would go to every tennis school, and from '84 on, every head coach that Vic hired is somebody that I trained, with the exception of Luke Wickham, who you know well, great guy, my real estate coach, and he's like Vic, he's a professional comedian, and. So he was hired. He did just complete an internship with Ray Benton, who's done a lot of things with Vic. So, but once he was hired to run Vic Braden Florida, that Luke spent a ton of time with us. He hired, Jeff Lewis at one point, and we used to all show up when Vic would show up.
Did you go to Marbella?
No, I was scheduled to go to Marbella, but no, I didn't go to Marbella. With Marbella, it was seasonal. I think this is important to mention.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly that there were schools in Marbella, and so Spain, Switzerland, Germany, and then Japan, right?
Right, and there was several. There was the island of Zilt, Ankam, Goslar, Reidenwinkel, maybe forgetting one. The Wittenberg brothers, they were in Barsinghausen. That's where the office was. They ended up setting a program up in this beautiful little town, Barsinghausen. I remember being there for meetings, and remember going over to where the Wittenbergs were, but they were both at a tournament. So I was actually there two different times, but never was there when they were there. Yeah.
And St. George. So, Koto, St. George, where Dave Nostrand was there before I got there.
Yeah, Mike McLaughlin did some work. He was one of Vic's, in Melody too, closest friends. But I was on the staff with with Mike and still talk to him on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
I know he did quite a bit of work in Utah.
Well, Jennifer Roberts was the first director there, right? And then Dave.
Yeah, but I
followed
think
her.
that, Mike McLaughlin was there getting it going. And then
Yeah.
I know Jennifer was hired full time. And then you mentioned Nostrand, Jakes. They were, like family extended. It was,
Cool.
they went from our tennis tech program.
Yeah. I ended up there. So, I mean, after I was in Koto for a couple of years, and then we were up in LA for a couple of years, and then I ended up in St. George when I was 17. And I remember Mark Jakes from when I was younger, because he would play against my first coach, Clark Barton, and I just remember he would show up at the profile, Wilson, and then Al Tomlinson. I don't know if you ever got to know Al.
No.
He was great. He was there. I worked with Al, but yeah, and then the age 17 on, that was basically home with St. George and then Koto, and then Orlando. He did a lot of in Star Island with Luke Wickham.
Yeah, it was Roy
Jeff
Vasquez was the first coach that he had, and then it was Luke Wickham, and then it was Jeff Lewis.
Jeffy B.
Roy Vasquez, he went to Tennis Tech. At one time, Roy Vasquez, Helen Harrison, Renee Hebert, Joe Lewandis, Steve Campbell. There's so many people who work for Vic at one of his tennis schools. I mean, I have a long list of students, and I know that this is a little bit of a sore subject with you. I think myself as well, but where it's just totally embellished. Where someone did a traveling weekend, and they tell people I have many students that worked for Vic for a traveling weekend. It's just not the same.
I don't know. I mean, in the end, Vic is like family. I mean, it was kind of a father figure. So I do get a little. I get protective a little bit, and but I always tell people, I'm like, well, let me just see your students hit the ball, and I'll tell you if you had a Braden influence or not.
Well, here's the story with Vic Braden the man, Vic Braden the resource, and that's what people in tennis need to pick up on. For me, I would tell people, well, I've never heard anyone explain the serve well if they don't directly or indirectly have a connection with Braden.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I mean, I just sit there and I listen, and like Mark Kovacs, Dr. Mark Kovacs, obviously he's doing so many great things. I was at a PTR function one time speaking, and it rains and everybody comes inside, and then he's up on the stage and everybody's in one room, and he's got a film of Patrick Gibson. Matt Clore was out here today, and I was really just a supplemental coach with Patrick, and Matt was working with them, but there's just Mark you can learn so much from Mark. Join his website or whatever. So it's all positive, but with it's like we're going to interview Jack Groppel. Jack Groppel and I were both spoon fed at the same time, and he was years ago, like Mark is today, Ask Doc, and like Mark, I mean, great, but Vic was not only a self biomechanist. Unlike Mark and Jack, he spent years in the trenches.
Sure.
Teaching. Mark's a very young guy, and Jack, I mean, he's one of the best classroom coaches ever. And it's sad that he's still not a voice within American tennis. But so this ties in with this is someone else like Kovacs and Groppel, who's great and has gone on, and it's greatness in many ways on his own, for sure. But when Vic Braden passed away, Craig Tiley, now the CEO of Tennis Australia, and like Nostrand and Jakes and Campbell, he's a tennis techer.
Yeah.
He's a tennis techer plus, because like a Dave Anderson, a tennis tech plus, because they were there several years.
Yeah.
I used to tease and say, these guys just can't graduate. But so Tyler wrote a really nice tribute, and eventually Craig Tyler, he had Vic down in Australia a couple times, twice, and to everybody, Vic was Uncle Vic. Once you get to know the guy, I mean, I think my mother had that ability that everybody felt like they were my mother's best friend, and that's the way Vic was.
Yeah.
So Gordon Smith, who was the former CEO of the USTA, someone sent him a post, And I was just complimenting Tylee's work on using Vic Braden as a resource. Took the team from Illinois from obscurity to winning the national championship.
Right.
But when Tylee first went to Illinois, now I know that it's like a Ryan Reedy. He does a great job. He's off on a few points, like the birthday hat. Ryan, if anybody's listening, he does a great job. He's so far better than the industry norm. And, to avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing, is that we have holes in what we do for sure. But it's a great teaching aid to say, knock off the birthday hat. And I'm sure that came from when he was teaching a lot of young kids. But when you do that, your hand gets too close to your head, it shortens the swing.
Yeah.
It's not comb your hair, it's comb a friend's hair. But
I would say, yeah, it has a tendency to do that. I mean, you can still knock a birthday hat off your head, or a cone or something with your hand away, but people have that tendency to get
like when you tell someone
close.
Comb your hair, somebody's very literal.
Yeah, that's the issue, I think.
So coming back to Tylee, is when he started at Illinois, if Vic walked in the room, Vic wouldn't have known him. Vic met so many people. If you were on his staff and you worked with them, like, say, all those people I've mentioned, but if you just traveled, I know Craig went up with that. He went to Cape Cod one time. He went to Aspen with me one time. And, he certainly made his mark. And then he brought Vic into Illinois, after he had been there, not from day one by any means. I was the person who went there every semester with the women's team long before Tylee was there. I mean, when Tylee's first trip to Illinois was assisting me coaching the women's team. So for a Labor Day weekend. But here's the thing is that Gordon Smith wrote me, and, Tylee was trained in America by an American. Trained by me. But the thing is that with Vic, today, that's what we're trying to do with the library. It shouldn't really be for a museum. Yeah. It should be a working art.
Exactly.
A working piece of art.
Yeah. Well, that's where I think, with some of the things we've been doing online and people like Ryan Reedy, that have gotten a good following on social media, people are now discovering Vic and rediscovering Vic. So that's great. That's great to see. I mean, some people say, "Oh man, these guys are just plagiarizing you," but we all learned some from someone. But anyway, you see that a lot. A lot of people are discovering Vic, and it's great.
One of our students that we teach directly, he comes and spends time with us. He's actually taught by Steve Roberts, and Steve Roberts is doing a great job in Northern California. So, kid by the name of Mateo beats a kid by the name of Tanner, and I'm called by a couple coaches, and I'm asked, "Do you know this kid Tanner?" Yeah. And I said, "Well, Matt Clore's watched him play over at the USTA." So Matt Clore is another coach who, Matt was out here the other day, and we were going through a few things, and I said, "Matt, let me ask you." So it's a little bit of a break, talking to some players, and I said, "Tell me one thing that you disagree with Vic Braden teaches." Mm-hmm. And he goes, "None."
Yeah.
And that's the way it works, because Vic used to say, if you disagree with something, give me the scientific rationale.
Yeah, just give me rationale.
So anyway, this young kid, Tanner, he's taught by Greg Lesueur, who's come up. His name's been mentioned in our podcast. And he's with online tennis instruction. So like Ryan Reedy, he's doing a great job. Mm. Great. I think that certainly one thing with Ryan, what you just mentioned, is he's giving credit to Vic Braden, which is fantastic. But Ryan was really trained by Jim Klein.
Right.
And Jim Klein went to Tennis Tech. Jim Klein, people need to take their hat off to Jim Klein, because he really was the one who was so persistent to get Vic into the Hall of Fame. In fact, he was there when you were there. Mm-hmm. Here's one thing with Braden, is he did touch millions of people's lives. But I've said there should be a book written. One of our students, a great guy, John Posey. Yeah. He's a writer. Say, Posey, let's get together and write this book. Vic Braden is missed, and Vic Braden was missed.
Yeah.
And, I think when he did pass away, I just, people would say, I really knew Vic's stuff. And I think of Ryler DeHart and Matt Clore. They're both born in '84. Now, I've had so much to do with Ryler DeHart. He first was taught by Thomas Olestead, who went to Tennis Tech. Ryler became a really good 12 and under player, and I'd only worked with him via video. So by the time he was 13, I was living in Florida, coached him every day. And so one time, Ryler had said to Matt, "You're really into that Steve Smith stuff." And Matt said, "Of all people, you should be the last person to call it Steve Smith stuff."
Yeah.
If people are listening to what we're talking about,
Yeah.
all these different pillars, it's just history. It's just, it's rich in history. It's just validated.
Yeah.
But people would say, "Well, yeah, Vic," and you could even tell how they would just gesture on the volley or, some movement they would make.
Like,
and
nope.
they would say like one or two things. And even that, I really like how you say, "Well, let me see your kids hit the ball."
Yeah.
And the umpire says, "Ready, play."
It's pretty easy to tell.
With Dave Anderson has a great idea that we should have a GreatBase get together out at his place. He's Brookhaven, the flagship of Club Corp. It's like a little tennis city.
Yeah.
Now, I think of this as not so much of a compliment for us, but Arthur Ashe said, you could recognize a Welby Van Horn student a mile away. Time after time, someone will see one of our students hit the ball, and they just go up and they just ask them, and they just know.
Yeah.
And I think that's not really so much a positive for us, but a negative for tennis. Roberto Calla, who's worked with us for 15 years, and he's from Peru. I made the mistake of saying Bolivia. He's from Peru, and what he will say, and it's always, I think, so interesting to hear people speak in their second, third language. That you watch a kid warm up, and he just goes, "No information."
Yeah.
Now, a lot of times, what happens in little kid tennis and junior tennis is little kid tennis, they don't understand big kid tennis, but little kids are playing free. They're not thinking about a conventional approach volley. They're not thinking about stepping underneath on a one-handed cross-court backhand trajectory being low. They're not thinking aggressive air margin to get in 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
They're just free. They're just banging balls.
Yeah.
And really, it's more and more, it's really sad. Kids can't go to the net, singles or doubles, and they're just looking to bang a forehand. And to get people's attention, some people say it's very bombastic, but you got clones taught by clowns. And so it's, it's like who wins in the end. A few things on Vic's library. There was no price for the longest time, and I set a price, $250,000, and was in constant communication with Mike McLaughlin. I really think it's a pot of gold. I really think that it was worth it. It's, if it was used properly, it's worth much more than that, and it would have been great for Vic's.
Well, to try to describe it to people, there may be a picture of it online, maybe somewhere, but it's lots of film, lots of tapes, books for sure too, but just tons of film, and it filled up in Kodo at Vic's house. It filled up a garage or a couple of garages.
About the size of a 4-car garage.
Yeah, I mean there was a lot in it, but it's packed.
Oh, you and I were at Melody's place and walked through it.
Yeah,
but it's 8mm, 16mm, beta, VHS,
lots
DVD.
of duplicates. Yeah, but amazing body of work. I mean, just when you read the labels and you just, man, there's so much in there.
No, I know that you and Vic have a lot of film where you were on the court with the Bryan brothers and Wayne Bryan. Kathy Blake, really was the mom, who was a really good player, was tuned into Vic Braden. Wayne has been so positive with what he's had to say. But somewhere in that library, there's film of Braden working with Bryan brothers.
Yeah.
And the Bryan brothers not playing doubles now. I mean, it's like Pete Sampras over and over just pounding the same points. Last time he played a match, an official match, came to net 104 times.
Yeah.
He didn't, because people want to win in the tens. The parents want to win. The kid wants to win. The coach of the 10-year-old kid wants to win.
The 2-inch trophy.
They weren't copying going to the net. And Ratzalova with her one-handed backhand.
What worries me about... Sorry, go ahead.
Also, I mean, the same thing with doubles.
Yeah. What worries me about the library being in the hands of the Tennis Channel, not to say that it's the wrong hands, but there's a certain amount of film in there that they just wouldn't know what to do with it, from an educational standpoint, where, there's going to be a few of us that it's like, hey, yeah, this is, you need to get that out there, and here's what it is, and
I think
why. So I'm afraid that things like that are going to get lost.
I think a shook arbitrage. They did this with Laver. Is that Melody will get some money. I mean, there was some monies paid to the Tennis Channel up front, but for film, if they use some film, he's making a documentary on Arthur Ashe. There was one made on Laver. But coming back to the kid Mateo from Northern Cal playing the kid Tanner, I've had nothing to do with Tanner. I've never seen him play, but Matt Clore gets to see everybody goes through the USTA. He's good enough to be over there with the USTA. He's been taught by Greg Lussor. Now, we spent a ton of time with Mateo and, Steve Roberts as well. Mm-hmm. That's where, and these guys are already playing in the 16s, but what needs to happen to American tennis is we got to do a better job with the 6-year-olds. Like Wayne Bryan, I think he made such a great point about 10 and under tennis. He said, no, it's all great, but it's 4 years too late.
Yeah.
This is what you need to be doing with 6-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Okay, boopy boop with the racket and racket control drills. And it's like Braden used to say, shut up and show me how to hit it.
Show me how to hit it.
With, and Vic was a psychologist. He really, he appreciated Tim Galloway, but Tim Galloway would say, pretend you're the ball. And Vic goes, that doesn't work for me.
Well, yeah, the whole point was that, the brain starts to pick up a motor program after just a few hits, really, like 8 hits. So if you get a bad start, then it's tough to change.
But during the pandemic, I mean, get myself in trouble, but there's experienced coaches they're in high profile positions, and they were telling people how to practice at home. And I'm going, really?
And it was boopity boop.
And it's like, take a ball, roll it around your racket, and
well, the frustrating part with that too, and I mean, it still involves Vic because this is all the technical stuff, but the at-home practice tape, Victor Lilov, wins 12 and unders, wins La Petites, and then just recently got to the finals of Wimbledon. It's all right there, and it's all free. It's on the YouTube channel, on the website, and that was offered to be put out by some of the governing bodies.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. Is that
there's a blueprint there.
Dave Schwartz, a very successful college coach who's won some national championships. I think he might be one of the only guys who's won it with men and with women. But he said to me one time, "You guys are like an underground rock band. You make good music, but not many people know who you are."
Yeah,
and certainly with Victor getting to the finals of Junior Wimbledon. Had so many people were watching him, and so many people were contacting me, and because it was just circumstantial. I mean, if people were to look at our content, they could follow Victor for 5 years.
Yeah,
and I mean, his sister is a scholar, and I can remember she was just working as a volunteer at NC State, because I went there. We had a group of realtors who were possibly going to build a place, and so the assistant coach, she's now she's working as assistant coach at Virginia, and so this is a fun story. So I said, okay, she wanted to work in the junior program. I said, yeah, no problem. You need to be trained, and she has a very impressive background as a junior and college player. And then I said, just go over with this girl. So Victor's sister, Radina, she's wearing blue jeans. And I, just, okay, if you would just teach her the dimensions of the court, if you would teach her the body balance positions, go through the grips, go through the checkpoints. Mm-hmm. And, hour and, 30 minutes later, she said, I just learned more about tennis than I have my whole life. Yeah. We make those 45-minute videos, and we tell people it's not to be egotistical, but when it comes to technical tennis, we'll make a tape for you, and 45 minutes later, you'll have learned more about tennis than you have since you've been in the game.
Yeah.
And that really, it comes from Vic. I mean, if the grip determines the angle of the racket face. The angle of the racket face determines the angle of the racket path.
Yeah, that reminds me of, there was a question, we've got several questions that came in. Maybe we'll answer those next week, but one of them was, what's, maybe your most used Vic Bradenism, and the dimensions of court and physical laws dictate stroke production, no coach's opinion or any unique theory. That's one we use quite often.
No, I have people say it to when it sounds, I grew up in a Catholic school. I mean, to me, it sounds like mechanical prayer.
Yeah, exactly. But I do like fuzz sandwich too.
With
Laugh and win.
Tim Gullickson. Tim Gullickson ended up at Vic Braden's, the late Tim Gullickson. Tragically, he died so early. He was coaching Sampras when he passed away. Great story. He's from, I think, Onalaska, Wisconsin. I'm mispronouncing that. Father's a barber and doesn't really play tennis. He plays football, basketball, baseball, plays tennis in the summer, goes to Northern Illinois. His twin brother, Tom. Tim is teaching, I think it's the Kettering Racket Club in Xenia, Ohio, and Hank Jungle, Air Force retiree, believes in him and gets him out on the tour, and he climbs up the tour. And it's one of those stories, if he can do it, I can do it. So then his brother a year later, and they're like, Tim was like 24, gave it a go, and then Tom 25. And what happened is Tim, when he was playing for Northern Illinois, went there with the idea that he's old enough where went with the idea that he was going to play freshman basketball, freshman tennis, and hope to play basketball. But he just played tennis within the last 3 years, and he played Tracy Austin's oldest brother, Jeff. Remember watching him play? He was a really good tennis player. He was ranked 25 in America. Back in those days, if you ranked 25 in America, my son Connor was ranked 14. I think it's a little bit different ranking back in the time where had all these top Americans. But nevertheless, so Tim Gullickson, he ends up at Vic's, and I'm just a hitting partner. I mean, I was so fortunate in my life to have so many jobs where I didn't have a speaking part. Where you don't say anything. You're just lucky to be among us. And so, Gideon Errol's there, and he just says, and they filmed him and upside down, inside out, and force plates and digitizing and da-da-da. Maybe you could do it next time, talk about the APAS system. But,
yeah, we can get into that.
So Gideon Errol says to Tim Gullickson, I am going to build a machine that will beat Borg 6-0, 6-0. And Gullickson, both of them are just big-time people, big-time people. And so then, Tim kind of smiles and goes, well, how am I going to do? So Vic, he's got a tape recorder. So I'm the pancakes are good, but I'm sitting here with Gideon Errol, Tim Gullickson, but I'm there because of Braden. And Braden, who's a psychologist, says, never listen to a psychologist. Psychology has nothing to do with it. It's physics. Yeah. And that's where, Tim and Vic was like, Tim, you have a car? Yeah, I have a car. Would you drive it across the bamboo bridge? Just to get people's attention.
Yeah.
And
Howard Brody, all the work with Howard. I know Vic was one of the people on his list that, helped the most.
On our listeners, don't get us wrong. I mean, we're going to interview Jim Lair. I mean, Dennis Van was just put in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I would think that Jim Lair is a shoo-in to be in the Hall of Fame with what he's done for the game of tennis worldwide. Yeah. So, but, Vic, Jim we have all these private tapes because people would come in and do 10-hour, 15-hour programs. And
At Tennis Tech.
And Jim Lair, you need strokes. Number one, you need strokes that hold up under pressure. Yeah. Number two,
if you don't have that, you can't keep your cool.
You need, the Lombardi quote, fatigue makes cowards of us all. Yeah. So you need to be, technique and mobility. The Spanish system, I mean, suffer. Yeah. You just suffer. And
yeah, that's good.
We talked about Russian tennis. Natalia, who we interviewed, she was here with her young daughter for the last week. And, she's so right that, if you can't endure physical pain, you will not be mentally tough. And then also, too, Braden, so many great, he just says things. There's no such thing as a perfect grip, just a grip with the least amount of adjustment. Yeah. If you don't trust your volley, if you don't value volleying position, if you don't understand stats, you won't go to the net.
Yeah.
You go to the net to lose at a faster rate.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, I just, where can I go with this? I think if you were to watch, like say a Raven Clausen hit balls, he came in, and the verb for us, to Bradenize, my English, we're going to, he was PJ Domdo. They were both 1 and 2. And, PJ had a forehand that was good for junior tennis. And it's like, no, I think you're only 17 years old. You got to win over Andy Roddick, but they're the same age. But I think your forehand's going to break down. Why don't you take a solid year? Clausen went 6 months, didn't play. There was a young girl that she ended up having some problems with her back. Larry Secchi, she was there. And I remember one time Raven, he was helping us out. So he's at the Eddie Herr, and, Liberty's knocking on the door to, have a chance to win it. I think it was the semis, and she could just play this tabletop approach shot. And with, just taking the ball on the rise, and, you meet it like a volley, you finish up, and, just keep going and going. I mean, we talk about Braden, you got to talk about Kramer.
Yeah.
I asked Welby Van Horn, he's the same age, they played doubles growing up. And, Welby's one of the best players in the world. But I said to him, what was Kramer's approach shot? I said, Braden always says that Kramer's approach shot was unbelievable. I said, when you hit short against Jack, what was that like? He goes, you just turned to the ball boy and asked him what the score was.
Yeah, I mean, Welby was part of that tour.
Yeah.
He was part of that.
But people went slower. I mean, we had a South African mom bring her daughter to us years and years ago, and she said, "You are not microwave tennis."
Yeah,
I mean, you've got to go slow. And I think so many times education doesn't come into it. I just tell a group of kids, hey, when you were very young, you didn't just sing the alphabet once.
Yeah.
It was day after day after day, exactly. And the multiplication tables. It's like you took the entire third grade year to get the multiplication tables down.
Well, in motor learning, it's been proven that it's like if you go really slow, it's better. When you're learning something, it's like you got to go slow first.
Yeah,
you can get it down.
We had a young gal, Cole Reeves, is someone who teaches tennis great. He's got a few players here, 4 players here that he's taught, and he teaches tennis so well. But what he's teaching is primarily, he's teaching GreatBase, and certainly everyone's an individual, and he's a bright guy. He's going to put in his own 2 cents and add to it. I mean, there's certainly knowledge and there's communication. How do you communicate the knowledge? Yeah. So that's the art form, and that's where the individuality comes in, the style.
Yeah.
But
the basic strokes.
So this young girl, Lannis Hamilton, so she has a silver ball, and so she's close. She's close, but I can't tell you how many times I would call Vic up. One of our students would win, an NCAA title or a USTA title. Even it could be, a kid who won in Japan or a kid who won in Germany, South Africa, whatever country, because Tennis Tech, the network, in some ways it's small, but it's definitely worldwide, would call Vic up and say, hey, with, this is where the kid hits the ball really well.
I remember years ago, through Vic, I worked with this girl who was a Vietnamese champion, but her coach there in Vietnam, he learned from Vic's book, and he became the national champion. And it was just through the book. I didn't have any direct involvement with Vic. I mean, there's so many stories like that.
Ed Faulkner, the late Ed Faulkner, he went to Cornell, and he just took courses that would make him a better tennis teacher. To me, and Vic did a great job of this, but it wasn't covered in his book like it was in Ed Faulkner's book. And Ed Faulkner would have pictures of club players in awkward positions and what have you. And Vic did some of that, but not to the same degree. And Jimmy Arias, his father, worked for Niagara Mohawk, and he taught his son out of Ed Faulkner's book. And Nick Bollettieri, he saw Jimmy hitting balls at a public park and said, "Hey, kid,
Yeah.
I got to start teaching everybody to hit the forehand like that."
Yeah.
Nick, I got into tennis, with my age when I entered, is that how everyone taught back in the day was penny on edge, 180-degree swing.
Right.
It's gone the other way. Now the grip's too far over. And, but Vic, people thought that he was way off when he started saying you close the racket face.
He was radical.
I think one thing you mentioned, the dimensions court, physical laws. But I think really, Braden, the theme would be, it's healthy for adults to disagree, but you have to end the utter nonsense. The utter nonsense with, tennis teaching, wild, weird, wacky world of tennis teaching. It needs rhyme and reason. It needs rationale. Coming back to what I said about Matt Clore, once again, Vic would say, if you can provide the rationale, and with, Matt certainly learning the game through his father and his own experiences, fit, plays well, just knows the game. He's lived the game. But just to have that as a resource. And I think really where it needs to start, it's like we talked about Peter Burwash and the upside down triangle. Okay, you're the CEO, Peter, but he can pick up a broom and he can get his hands dirty. And Vic, with going to it's really well known, it might be next to Bollettieri's in this country, it might be the second best known program. Ray Ben is the GM, is Junior Championship Tennis Center. Is that right?
You're mixing me up, but Junior Champions.
We have a student. We've had a couple students here who worked with Mitchell Frank. I've been introduced to Mitchell Frank. I've watched him play. I know my son Connor. I mean, it was a major accomplishment for my son Connor. Beat him in the pros the one time they played. My son wouldn't have beat him in the juniors, and he wouldn't have beat him in college. Dennis Kudla, who comes from the program in Maryland, College Park.
Yeah,
I believe he's from the Ukraine originally. They said they couldn't get him to stop hitting the backboard. But anyway, hits the ball, very well, and I mean he's been 50, 60 in the world. So he's hitting with Nadal, and he's interviewed afterwards. And they go, "Do you think Nadal is the most mentally tough tennis player in the world?" And he goes, "No, I think Mitchell Frank is." And I mean, Mitchell Frank, he won this, he won that in juniors, and in college as a freshman, he goes and he just, easily wins the All-American out in Tulsa. But I can remember before Vic passed away, he had gone out there, and then I ended up being in California. And in all fairness to Mitchell, can you imagine if the guy had really good strokes?
Yeah, I remember Vic coming back from College Park, and I won't say. I just remember his feedback.
Well, no, it's like Tiafoe. I have no problem. Tiafoe, I mean, I was around him for 2 weeks. He's hanging out with my son. They practice, play some doubles, and that guy has absolutely no stage fright. Great for the game. I think it was so emotional. He wins enough money where he tells everybody, "I'm going to be able to buy my parents a house," and he could be a little better on the backhand side.
I think it's efficiency, right? I mean, that's really just, we could use that word that Vic used all the time, was just to be efficient so you can reduce injury, and that was always a big part of the research. I know we may do 3 episodes on Vic. My goal for this first episode, it's been an hour and a half here already, but really it was just to kind of introduce Vic. I'm sure there's a few people out there that didn't know too much about Vic, but his background, everything that he did. I mean, we didn't even really get into the research part of it yet with Gideon. The Dakota Research Center of 40 sports, the ski college. He was just a curious mind and wanted to do a lot of different things. So I think we can pick up on a lot of that.
Yeah, let's
in the
end it
next
there.
episode.
Let's end it there. And
a lot of people ask questions too. There's some questions that we will answer as well. Just things that they want to know about Vic or about our experiences with Vic.
I think one thing just to end for me is the motto, laugh and win. I used to tell Vic, I don't get the laugh part.
Yeah.
But, that's where you're trying to change kids' character and, change their work ethic. And, that's not a bowl of cherries. And but laugh and win. There's just so many things I think of coming back to like Jack Kramer's comment on Gabrielle Sabatini. We talk about that is that to win and win big. But I don't think it's scoreboard. I think it's like, okay, how can my skills get better?
Yeah.
How can and then, winning's a byproduct of skills. I'll say this at the end. The last thing today is that tonight, confidence comes from winning. Winning comes from skills. Skills come from practice and know-how.
Yeah.
And Fat Albert, Uncle Vic, he had the know-how.
Yeah. The question that I got a lot was, obviously, what was it like? You're so lucky, you spent all that time with Vic all those years. What was it like to work with Vic? And I usually just tell, there's the tennis side of things like you just talked about, and he had the know-how, but on a personal level, it was really just like Vic was the kind of guy that you'd be around and just make you want to be a better person. Like just the way he talked to people, the way he treated people, like you said, the way he would say things, but, being around Vic, it was special. And you did have that, it was like, it just made you want to be better. I don't know how else to say it, but that's, for me, it would be a good compliment, just made you want to be better.
Again, I've only been around Tom Gullickson, did some corporate outings with him, saw him out in Hawaii when my son was playing a tournament there. But Tim Gullickson, the Gullies can have a beer, and with 2 different times with Tim Gullickson and Vic Braden having a beer. But, I just think with, we'll come back to some key points. But with Vic Braden, if you do your homework, still with books, tapes, certainly with what we're putting out there, in a big way, if you know the content, you could learn more away from Vic Braden than with Vic Braden. So it's not like, well, you had to be around Vic every time. No, that's where he was such a true, pure educator. The information is just rock solid, is that then you grow with the information.
Yeah, you can use it in different ways.
Yeah, right. You learn from yourself, you learn from your students, you learn from your overall experiences. And, but that's where awareness, acceptance, commitment, okay, you're being told, okay, the court's 19.1 degrees. Do you accept that? And then are you going to commit to that?
Yeah.
And then are you going to teach? The way people are teaching the forehand, I think that's the way a snake goes down a hole.
Yeah.
Really? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But then all you have to do is say ready, play. But then we have the problem of the merchant of flesh, the person who's at the weekend tournament, they're handing out the business card. They haven't taught anybody. They're just a great salesperson. And it's just, they're hustling. And then where does it end up?
Yeah.
Does the kid really have the type of game, Braden, is it going to hold water? Will they be able to play down the road? Fact-based instruction for long-term development. Well, you got to start with facts.
Yeah.
Vic was about facts.
It's got the facts. All right.
I'm out.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to that first episode. We will continue our discussion on Vic Braden next week. And you can do some homework on Vic. I'm sure there's plenty there online. You can find, like I said, lots of pictures. There are videos that are on YouTube that people have put up. But hopefully you got some out of this and some background, and you can submit questions if you'd like to reach out to us on social media. Instagram, you can send me a direct message there, info@greatbasetennis.com. And until next time.
Thank you.
Adios.
I hope these podcasts are helping. Thanks for listening.
Laugh and win. Laugh a minute. All right, kids. Ciao.